Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today for Vendini's webinar on why your events need better branding. My name's Alec Lewandowski, and I'm the head of product marketing here at Vendini. And today I'll be presenting with Rick Dines, managing artistic director at Springfield Contemporary Theater. Today we'll be going into why it's important to focus on your brand, how focusing on your brand can really create that familiarity with your patrons, and then converting that familiarity into building legitimacy behind your brand and a trusting relationship between your brand and your patrons. From there, I'll pass it over to Rick Dines, who's going to go into examples of how Springfield Contemporary Theater brands their individual events and the benefits they see from that. And then at the end, we'll have a quick couple minutes for Q&A. So first, why is it important to focus on your brand? When we talk about brand, what we're really talking about is your company's story, your values, your mission, really what your company is all about. And the way that brand manifests itself publicly is your logo, or some of the brands that I have here. Coca-Cola is a really great example, where they really focus on the text and the lettering of their brand, the kind of shape of their C's. And the way that they do this is so strong that no matter where you are in the world, you can recognize a Coke can. If you're in a quick stop, you're gonna know if you're in Korea or France or Germany, you're gonna be able to really recognize that Coke can because of how distinct Coca-Cola's logo is and that brand. Another great example of this is Starbucks. For Starbucks, they're less focused on the lettering and they're more focused on this Starbucks green and this image. They're so focused on it that they believe that, as you're walking down the street, if you see this green out of the corner of your eye, you're going to recognize that as Starbucks. It's that powerful. And even so, they've gone to the extent of actually removing the lettering of Starbucks coffee around their logo. So now they believe, people know our green and they're just going to recognize this right off the street. And so these are really great examples of brands that have excelled at really emphasizing who they are and starting to build that familiarity. And then obviously, such strong brands, they've really developed that loyalty among their fan base. So when we talk about brand and building that familiarity and converting that into loyalty, what we're really talking about is keeping brand top of mind. When someone thinks of coffee, they think of Starbucks most commonly, or if they're thinking of soda, a lot of times in the top three things they're going to think of is Coca-Cola. And so you want to be able to have that with your own brand, where when someone thinks of, oh, where should I go see a show tonight? They think of your venue or they think of your theater, and that's where they want to go. So as you build this familiarity, what we're really talking about is kind of moves management or the evolution of a patron, going from that first time that they have a friend bring them to your theater, and then maybe they have, a wonderful experience ideally, and they come back for a second time. And then after that second time, maybe they're like, oh, I want to bring someone of my own to the theater, and they come back as that multi-ticket buyer. And then, as the familiarity builds, they become this more loyal patron to you. There's someone who maybe is a season ticket holder, a subscriber, or a member, and then eventually someone who maybe donates to your theater often. And then eventually they become, in live music we would call this a super fan, but in theater, this is someone who's an investor, maybe even sits on your board. This is someone who is almost blindly loyal to your brand. A really great example of this that I've had in my own life is with a local venue here in Sonoma. Lagunitas Brewery does a concert series. And they've been doing this for 5 or 6 years. And I remember the first year I went, there were 2 or 3 artists that I recognized on the lineup. And I thought, oh, I'll go see those individual shows. And I had a really awesome experience. And what I saw was that in the following year, not just those artists I went to see, but across the whole range of their lineup, I was then seeing these artists on major festivals like Coachella and Bonnaroo and Outside Lands. And what I realized as I grew with their brand and kind of built that loyalty, I now would try to attend almost every single show that they put on in the summer because I really trust their brand. And I know that when I go to the show, the experience is really going to be great. So how do you start building that familiarity with your brand? One way to start doing this is really looking at your audience and thinking about who you're expecting to come to your show, and then also who you want to attract to your show. Say you're a theater and you put on a show of Newsies, and then you're also going to put on a show of Grease. Well, those audiences are probably very similar, and you'll want to invite them to the same show. But if you're also doing a production of King Lear or Macbeth, those are probably going to be very different audiences, and you're going to want to treat them differently so that you can show that you understand what their interests are and what they're really coming to expect from your theater. So you want to start to segment and prioritize your patrons and your fans and really identify different ways that you can speak to them and show them that as a brand, you understand who they are and understand what they want from your theater. And similarly, if you were breaking up by the different types of theater performances, maybe you run 3 different venues. You have a black box for cabaret, you have a comedy club, and you have a theater. Well, these are all going to be very unique audiences, and you'll want to speak to them in cadences that relate to them. So what are some ways to segment? When we talk about segmenting, some of the different ways that you can do it, I've listed out here, but there are a plethora of them. Starting with kind of the casual patron, as we look back on that patron life cycle, that person who comes in for the first time at your show, the offering to them may be something where you want to boost their experience and offer them a coupon to the next show. You're really focusing on bringing them back and getting them to build that familiarity with your theater. Whereas someone who's maybe a donor or a board member, they're already going to be coming back. They're already this loyal patron of yours. And you're going to really want to be doing things to boost their experience, to kind of give them that VIP treatment. If it's meeting them at the door when they show up or providing them maybe exclusive meet and greet, things like that. Another great way to look at segmenting is by the types of events and interests. Like we talked about before, if you're running a comedy show and a theater and a cabaret, you're going to want to talk to these individual patrons differently than you would if they were all coming to theater. These are different patrons, and the way you build that familiarity and trust with these patrons is showing them that you really understand them. And then when we get into demographics, there are a ton of ways we can break this up, but age is a really great way to start. Someone that comes maybe with their whole family is going to be a lot different than someone who comes as a single person, or someone who comes as a student. You may want to offer them a discount or a early show, something where they can really afford it. You may want to give them a loyalty program, something where they can build up to getting a free show. And also, if you're really focused on visitors and locals, maybe a local person is going to want different communication in your email marketing, where a visitor may want suggestions of places to eat or other things to do in the area. And that really helps you communicate to them that you really understand what their needs are. So after you've really built this familiarity, you want to move into building that legitimacy and really establishing trust with your brand and your patrons. A great way to start doing this, and you can do this again, just like segmenting, there are a ton of ways to really emphasize this legitimacy with your brand. But your website is your main stop shop, your main storefront for patrons to come and experience your brand. So right from the get-go, you want to make sure that your website is something they can find. You don't want them searching for your website in Google and having to go to that second page of results, search results in Google to find you. You really want to make sure that you're in those top results because that helps them build trust that they've come to the right place. Once they get on your website, you're going to want them to make sure that experience is great. And that starts with making sure that they can view the website on any format. So if they're on their phone, you want to make sure it's responsive to that. If they're viewing on an iPad, you want to make sure that's responsive. Or if they're a student in their library, the desktop experience should be great as well. Once they get onto your website and they've found it and it's responsive, really, this is when you want to focus on, does your website represent the brand that they've come there to expect? Is the colors the same colors that they've come to expect? Are the nuances in the language you use, is that relatable to your patrons? Can they easily see your logo and understand the experience you're really trying to portray? And then lastly, I always like to include and make sure that there's a very clear path to purchase. You don't want to make patrons get onto your website and have to click around all over the place. You really want them to get on there, find the show they want to go to, and have a great experience in purchasing that ticket and all the way through when they show up at your venue. So as you move through that checkout experience, something I really like to focus on is making sure that you keep that experience between the brand that you're representing and your patrons. A lot of times, if you're going through like a third-party reseller or something, you'll end up clicking on the website and then you jump to a new website that is totally unrelated or doesn't look the same look and feel. And now you're having to really share that brand with someone else and you're losing a bit of the control. So you really want to make sure that that transition is seamless when they come to your website or if they start on social media and then come to your website and then all the way through the checkout and all the way to that in-venue experience. All of that combined is really going to help you establish a great brand and kind of move some of those patrons with familiarity and a legitimate brand from being that first-time ticket buyer all the way to being a donor or a season ticket holder or sitting on a board. So from here, I'm going to introduce Rick Dines, who is going to go ahead and show us how Springfield Contemporary Theater really excels on branding their events and the benefits that they've seen from that. Welcome, Rick.
Thanks, Alec. Before we dive into specific event branding, I want to jump off on something Alec said. As your name suggests, as our name suggests, the majority of the work we produce at Springfield Contemporary Theater has been written in the last 5-10 years. And when it comes to branding shows that are that new and that aren't Hamilton or based on some famous blockbuster movie, it's a lot more challenging. With some shows, they come with their own built-in brand. But over the years, we've communicated with other organizations in other cities, as well as organizations around our community, trying to get ideas and bounce things off of people. And some of the best ideas I've come up with have actually been with our local art house cinema, because they're also a small nonprofit. They're trying to put out content and put content out there in front of people that is maybe less known to the public. And so, as we've talked, one of the things that is key to that is our organization's brand and trusting, creating a trust with the organization's brand in order to find success. We try to really clearly distinguish our brand and our role within our community so that, potential customers get an immediate sense of, what they can expect at SCT. As well as what sets us apart from other organizations in town. For example, our programming, it really doesn't include any kind of children's theater or titles that are geared to a family audience. Not a block away from us, there's another large theater where their youth programming and their thriving education program has really kind of in recent years become their primary focus. And we just honestly don't want to step on their toes. We don't have the infrastructure to do it better. And nor do we have the interest, honestly. So, we really focus our energy on producing what we kind of call grown-up theater. Not that every show we produce is R-rated or or that but we're just not looking to capture that family audience. And in general, we're probably about the only theater in our community that's not shying away from content in any way. And so by embracing that niche that we have, a general audience is a lot less confused about what kind of experience they're going to have at Springfield Contemporary Theater. We produce a wide range of different kinds of shows and events and music events and other things, but we've really built a real strong, dedicated patron base because they trust us and they know the material we select and the productions we mount are going to be strong and up to their expectations, even though more often than not, they don't really know what the show is they're coming to see because it's nothing they've heard of before we put it on our slate. And so we put our primary emphasis in our marketing into direct mail, our email blasts, our social media, as far as the content we have control over. So as Alex has posted here, this is from our current production that just opened last week of The Legend of Georgia McBride. And you can see I work very closely with our graphic designer. We want to create an image that's eye-catching and captures the spirit of the show, but also to a degree helps educate the audience as to what the show itself is. In this case, it's a comedy about an Elvis impersonator that turns to doing drag in order to make ends meet, and it's set in Florida. And so that in a real nutshell is what the show is. And so we really tried to capture that with this image. And then we use that image to headline our website, to headline our Facebook page, as well as our email blasts that we put together, through Vendini. And so, in our email blasts, I try to take a couple colors from that, the prominent colors from that image, and I use that for that outside coloring. I use it for headline fonts and other things. And then whenever you get to Facebook and we start creating, posts in our feed about the show, we try to start then building that story around the production. And before we have production photos and things to offer, we're looking for other content, and so with a show like this that is very much about at times the outrageousness of the clothes and other things, we had pictures of shoes as we were going through shoe selection process and wigs and other things. And so that kind of started becoming some of the story as we were building into the show. And we worked hard to also, in those images, put some element of the logo into those photos. So when those photos go beyond us and get shared to other social media platforms or the cast uses them for other things, there's something that ties it back to the show. And that said, and it's obvious, but one of the best assets you have in building a story around a show are those people working on that show, because people bring in other people. So, we encourage our cast, our creative team, and even our crew to, on their own feeds, generate stuff about the show. And then when somebody comes up with a really good, strong, unique, creative post, we share those to our own page. That picture of the shoes is actually something that was posted by one of our follow spot operators. And we've reposted it and it got a lot of traction for us. So, the thing is, not all good ideas come out of the marketing department. When you've got good ideas that you're not having to pay for, latch onto them. So then once somebody's gotten the message about your show and they move over to your website or they're trying to find more information about it, we want to make sure that information is succinct and that clear, and that anything they might be looking at, they can find quickly. Obviously want to make sure there's a path to purchasing tickets there as well. And so here, we want to make sure our calendar block is clear, and as Alec talked about in segmenting audiences and trying to promote to certain audiences, one of the things we find is that price point can be a target to certain audiences. So, we want to make sure that we're not hiding information about like our student rush. We live in a college town with 3 universities, so our student rush is big and brings in a lot of young audiences. We've also, over time, started doing a cheaper opening weekend because we found that by front loading in the audiences, it really helps start generating word of mouth a lot quicker. Because, in general, people procrastinate. And if you let everyone procrastinate to the end, you have a soft beginning of the run and the end is sold out and you're turning people away. So we want to get that word of mouth generating as quick as we can. Also, more recently, we've added our Pay What You Can Thursdays, which, I'm sure like others, we were scared that was going to start cannibalizing on full price tickets. And we've been really pleasantly surprised that for the most part, that's only really being utilized not by returning ticket buyers, but by new ticket buyers and people who have been interested in us, but haven't really been able to come because price, was an issue. And then we also here want to, talk about any special events we have happening on performance nights, but we'll come back to that later. So when the customer then clicks forward to buy tickets and gets to Vendini, we again are working to carry that brand through and that imagery of the production through that experience. These new functions of Vendini are really helpful in creating that experience for the for the ticket buyer. And so, we obviously are keeping the coloring, and now I'm working with our graphic designers. We're working on images for shows to also make sure that whatever that background is in that image is something I can then carry through into the ticketing, and it helps create that sense. And then, like I said, when we have these special events, we're also carrying that special event information through in the setup of those events, so that if somebody's interested in that, they can see that immediately when they come to select their dates for the show. And so finally, that brings you around to the core part of the audience experience, which is when they actually come to the theater to see the show itself. If you've worked hard to create this overall vibe and experience that you want them to have with the show, you don't want that experience to fall flat once they actually, walk into the building. So, we work to carry that image through in terms of window banners, posters in the lobby, and other things. If you're selling merchandise, it's great to carry that image through. And some places, you're also talking about things like unique drink offerings that tie into the vibe of the show. As Alec mentioned, food packages with local restaurants that help for out-of-town people that need suggestions, figuring out how to tie that into the vibe of the show. And then, like I said, we also do other experiences that, follow performances. Opening weekend on Friday and Saturday nights, we do receptions, and those receptions aren't just for season ticket holders or donors, but are for the entire audience. They get to come out to the lobby, and there's food and drink, and they get a chance to meet the cast, the creative team, staff members at the theater, and get a chance to discuss the production and just meet people in that regard. And it's by doing that opening weekend, what we really do is send that first weekend audience out with a really strong spirit of goodwill that transforms into good word of mouth right up front. Because basically you're converting these patrons into unpaid ambassadors of your brand. So and then inside the run of the show, we will do post-show talkback discussions with the director and cast and creative people on the show. Sometimes we'll bring in outside professionals in different fields to help flush out topics that are in the show itself. And so we do all of that to kind of help that experience continue beyond the final curtain. And so, we're at such an age where the amount of consumable content is just growing exponentially by the year that as live entertainment, it's vital that we, find our ability to create an overall experience that starts out from the marketing stage, but continues till after the audience has, left the theater, and really embracing that to set ourselves apart. It's, something that Netflix can't do. And so we need to make sure we're doing that as well as we can. And with that, I'm going to throw it back to Alec.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rick. I really appreciate it. So just reviewing what we talked about today, starting off and looking at, does your brand tell your story? Does the public-facing image of your brand represent your mission and your goals as a company? And then, are you keeping brand top of mind? Are you doing everything you can with familiarity to make sure that when someone is thinking about where should I go tonight, they're thinking about your theater and what's happening there. They're thinking about your venue to see what show might be going on. And then to really get that going and follow through and building trust through consistency with your brand and making sure that the brand's public image is consistent across all of your channels. And then finally, on one of the pullouts from what Rick was saying, is really making sure to find your niche with your audience and making sure that you know your audience and you're speaking to them in a way that is really powerful. So we've got a little time here for some Q&A. And just to let everyone know, this webinar will be recorded. And so we'll go ahead and share that with everyone after the fact if you want to share it with any other employees or anyone else. And this will be coming and hosted on our website here soon. And then if we aren't able to address your questions here in the Q&A, we have quite a few of them, but I'll go ahead and kick some off for you, Rick. The first one we have here is, do you do any branding on your tickets?
We do not. We do not. As a matter of fact, we're using that Vendini stock that you see right there on screen. So, yeah, we don't. For the most part, patrons usually aren't holding tickets in hand until the night of the show. So it's not like that. That for us, we don't see that spending money there is going to change much of change much of that experience on our end. But obviously for some it might. So.
All right. The next question we have here is, right now we are a niche, but we have a stigma of being more of an upper class, and we're trying to shed that and let people know that we're not here just for the elite. How do we change our brand to let people know we're really for everyone?
Honestly, I think some of the things I talk about, for us, one of those keys, for us, that Pay What You Can Thursday changed us, changed things for us a lot. It was tough to push by the board. It's something we had talked about for quite a while. But like I said, the great surprise when we put it into place was that we were not really getting return customers utilizing it. It was new customers. And it grew so quickly. We've expanded how much we're doing with it, and we're very happy with it. Another theater I have attended elsewhere has a program, and mind you, this was probably 15 years ago, but a program I thought was great, which was, they were selling, for the most part, I think about 80% capacity on a regular basis. And they had what they called a $5 seat filler ticket. And you walked up to the box office, paid $5 cash, and at curtain time, they released that line in the order they arrived into the theater to fill empty seats. They had a very strict no late seating policy. And if they didn't have enough seats to seat everyone, then those people came back to the box office and got their $5 back and went away. And I thought that was a really unique and interesting policy that I hadn't seen anywhere else. Again, you start wondering, is that going to cannibalize? But, the patron that wants to come in and reserve their ticket in advance and have a good seat and know they've got a ticket for the night, which is the majority of your patrons, they're not going to be interested in that, even though it might get them a cheaper ticket. So.
Great. I think we have time just for one more here, and that is, how do you brand your email marketing with events and your organization? How do you go about making them both work together?
As far as our organization stuff, it carries through, but I try to headline the top of that email blast with whatever the current production is. There's plenty of room for our image down below. There's plenty of room within the email, but I want to catch them right off the bat as they open it with what's happening now. If they've already gotten on your email list, they're already familiar, somewhat familiar with your brand. So as far as the organization brand. So at that point, we're really trying to catch them for a specific, event.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. And like I said, we'll have this presentation online and available in the coming days, and we'll share the recording here with everyone who's attended if you want to share it with anyone else. All right. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks, everyone.